bit about the weapon itself first, so how something like this operates, and then I'll go through the manual exercise where I do load up the weapon and fire it off. Sound good?
Yeah.
All right. So what you all are taking a look at here is a Flintlock Musket, and this is the infantry weapon for the American Revolution. So this type of gun, really this type of weapons technology, it's not just what the Continental troops are using. This is also what you would see the British using, the French, the Hessians, and other Germans who are involved. Everybody is using the same overall type of weapons technology during this war. Calling it a flintlock because of your ignition system on the weapon here. So you've got a nice sharp piece of flint that is right there. When you pull the trigger, that flint will strike the steel hammer. Frizzen is a more modern term often used for this piece, if anybody happens to be familiar with that. When flint strikes steel, what does that produce? Sparks, exactly, yeah. So sparks will fall into the priming pan, which would have a little bit of gunpowder in it. The sparks will ignite that gunpowder. Small opening on the side of the barrel will allow the flame that's created to travel inside, ignite the charge inside the barrel, weapon discharges. And that all happens in a split second. So it takes way longer to describe the process than it does for the process to occur. It is a single shot weapon. You do have to reload this every time that you fire it. And the other important aspect about the musket here is that this is a smoothbore weapon and not a rifle. So it does not have rifling, grooves, ridges on the inside of the barrel to give a bullet a nice accurate spin to it. Now there are rifles in the 18th century. The technology had actually been around for a while, even by that point in time. However, rifles are not the infantry weapon, not quite yet. They are more hunting weapons than anything else in the 18th century. They are not going to be produced on a large scale like these muskets will be, so that does mean they still have a pretty hefty price tag on them. And they are rather personal weapons as well. Each rifle is going to be different. They're not really going to be made to the same standard that these muskets are. Now, you will certainly see some soldiers using rifles during this war on all sides of the conflict, but this is what the vast majority are going to be equipped with. And since this is what the majority of the soldiers are using, well, what do your tactics have to revolve around? What your soldiers are actually using out on those battlefields, right? So, that being said, yes, a rifle is certainly going to be more accurate versus a smoothbore weapon like this one here. But you are still looking at an overall effective range of about a football field with this musket, about 80 to 100 yards on average. So what I mean by that is you can hit a person-sized target that is a football field length away with a musket ball from one of these things. I am not telling you which target you will hit. I am not telling you you will hit the same spot every single time. I'm just saying that you can hit something at that distance. And to be quite honest with you all, doesn't matter where you hit that enemy soldier either, because this is a 75 caliber weapon. That's big, even by modern standards. So even if you got hit in the arm or the leg with that musket ball, are you fighting anymore that day? Nope, you're in a world of pain at that point. Weapon has still done its job out on that battlefield. You are not shooting at me anymore. And that's exactly what I wanted. So where there is a big advantage, believe it or not, with this being smoothbore is actually in the loading time of the weapon itself. This is the faster loading of the weapons, about 15 seconds on average for a well-trained soldier in the Continental Army to get this thing loaded up and ready to go. Now, admittedly, that's probably not too impressive to us these days. 15 seconds for one shot today. How are we doing? It's terrible, right? But in the time period, it's actually pretty good. That is as quick as you can get. That rifle, on the other hand, it's not something that everybody always realizes, but they do take a longer time to load. Especially with those 18th century rifles, as you loaded the weapon, you would actually have to work everything through the rifling inside the barrel. And, I mean, maybe we're not talking about a lot of time in the grand scheme of things. Maybe we're looking at closer to a minute versus 15 seconds. But how long is a minute in a combat situation? A long time, right? Even 15 seconds is a long span of time on a battlefield as well. But again, that is as quick as you can get. So this type of weaponry, it really is not that effective in an individual situation. You are not going to accomplish anything by having small groups of soldiers here or there independently working of each other and trying to pick off individual targets. You need collective firepower with something like this. A lot of soldiers working together, firing the weapons off at the same time, and really kind of centralizing their firepower to a particular area on that battlefield. And that does certainly play into those linear tactics that they're using at the time. And we've all probably seen them. shows, and they're standing in these big long lines on this wide open battlefield, shooting back and forth at each other. And I'm simplifying it a little bit, of course, but how does that look to us today? Like a really smart thing to do or a really silly thing to do? You be honest. Yeah, it looks absolutely silly, doesn't it? And you know what? If we fought that way on a modern battlefield, with our modern weapons technology, with our rapid firing, accurate weapons, it would be a silly way to fight. It would be a horrid way to fight on a modern battlefield, but not so much on an 18th century battlefield, because you are absolutely limited by the weapons technology of the time. Also, keep in mind, your goal on that battlefield is to drive the enemy force off of the field, not necessarily kill everybody. Now, you need to drive the enemy away through whatever means necessary, but really at the end of the day, can you basically get your enemy scared enough to run away and retreat off that battlefield? Achieve that through using a lot of people. Achieve that by having hundreds of these weapons going off at the same time, artillery pieces going off at the same time, so it's loud, it's confusing, it's smoky. See anything else scary on the weapon here? Bayonet. The bayonet, exactly. That is something else that a musket will have that a rifle will not. Intimidation is definitely at play on these battlefields as well. So imagine, if you would, the enemy, which is lined up down there, hundreds of well-trained, well-disciplined soldiers, all of a sudden, all lower their weapons at the same time, so those bayonets are pointed at us. They start charging in our direction as that collective force, and they're yelling and screaming as loud as they possibly can as they're getting closer and closer and closer to us. Now, I don't know about you all, but if I saw hundreds of soldiers running my way with spears and screaming at me, guess what I'm doing? I'm running the other way, exactly right. But I have now just done exactly what they wanted. So I know a lot of movies and TV shows will show those bayonet charges as kind of being a very desperate last attempt to win the day. It's actually a very calculated move on the officer's side of things. So needless to say, it all takes a lot of training. It all takes a lot of discipline. But you know what? When you're in camps like this, guess what? You have all the time in the world to drill, to train, and to practice. So I'm going to take a couple steps back here and go through the manual exercise, which is the step-by-step loading and firing process these soldiers would have learned. First, though, I am going to do something they did not do back then, and that is put in a little bit of hearing protection. So these do have a habit of being on the loud side. For any of you all who do not care for loud noises, I will give you a heads up to cover your ears when the time comes to do so no worries. I'm going to go a little bit slower than the 15 seconds, but I'm going to go step by step and kind of explain what I'm doing as I'm going. Now, all in all, if I include the firing commands, this is a 12-step process. So bringing the weapon to the prime and load position like this, first command is half-cock fire lock. It's basically the safety of the weapon. Next command, handle cartridge. Reach around into that cartridge box, pull out a pre-made tube filled with gunpowder. Now, back in the 18th century, this would have had the musket ball in it as well. No musket ball in here today for obvious reasons. It is just the black powder. My hands are a little full, so I'm just going to rip it open like that. Next command is prime. Pour a little bit of powder into the pan, shut pan, charge with cartridge. Everything else goes down the barrel, just like that. Again, no rifling, that I have to work everything through. Next command is draw rammer, ram down cartridge, return rammer, always return that rammer, don't shoot that down the battlefield, you need that. Final command is shoulder fire lock. Visual for the officers, showing that the weapon is loaded and ready to be fired. You do wait for the officer's commands before you fire the weapon as well. So if you'd like to cover your ears, now's a good time to go ahead and do so. Make ready. Take aim. Fire. Ooh, what happened? Nothing. Exactly right, nothing. So now you see one of the other advantages to using those linear tactics. My weapon happened to misfire, which if I was by myself, pretty terrible situation to be in, right? Now, I don't know about you all, but I did not see any sparks come off of that flint right there. So lucky for me, that's the easiest misfire to actually recover from. So I'm going to wipe the flint off right there. I also have a tool in my cartridge box here that I can use. Put a little bit of a sharper edge back on that flint. What do you think? Should we try that again? Make ready. Take aim. Fire. There we go. And there you have it. That's one of these weapons going on. So to do you think? Anybody ready to enlist after seeing all that?
Let's go.
All right, fantastic.